Hey, I didn't see you there. I was putting some final touches on my artwork that I'm going to submit. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to finish up our government presentations here today. And much like you did yesterday, just jot down some main ideas, some examples, some notes, etc., etc. I saw some people wrote a ton. You don't need to do that. Just kind of add an easy way to do it. Write a little chart or something. Fill in a little chart. Later today, maybe you're seeing it now, maybe you'll see a little bit later. You're going to have an assignment that will be due tomorrow. And you're just going to summarize / reflect on the government types. And you will not need to reflect on the one you already presented because, well, I think you proved you know what it means. So at the end of the day, you're just going to reflect on 3. There's 4 total, and you're just going to make 3 reflections. All right, without further ado, we are going to start our presentation, starting with Mr. Carta at the top, and we will go in an order from there. So here we go.
Tyrants by Nathan Carter. A tyrant was sometimes a wealthy person who took power in a legal way and ruled with complete power over an entire country. In Greece, a tyrant was a person who became king without being from a royal family. Today, being a tyrant means to rule in a cruel way. Past tyrants. Nubis ruled Sparta from 192 to 207 BC. Nubis saw himself as a legitimate king, but ancient historians such as Levi and Polybus claimed he was a tyrant. Dinos ruled Cyrus was a Greek colony from 367 to 405 BC. According to ancient historians, he was one of the cruelest and most vindictive rulers in ancient world. Current tyrants. Russia's ruler is Vladimir Putin, who has ruled from 1999 till today. China's ruler is King Jinping, who has ruled from 2013 till today. Thank you.
Alright. Oligarchy by Andrew Marr. What is an oligarchy and how does it work? An oligarchy is when a small group of people have control of a country, organization, or institution. The people in control are often related by things they have in common, such as their beliefs, interests, family, or status. Who ruled by an oligarchy and how did they rule? How does it work? The few people in power make the rules. Who ruled by oligarchy? In an oligarchy, the people who ruled were the elite people, or the highest class. How did they rule? They made laws that suited their needs, not necessarily the needs of the people they ruled. How and when was an oligarchy present in Greece? In Greece, the oligarchy of the 400 took over Athens in the year 411 BCE, followed by an oligarchy of 5,000. Also in Athens, an oligarchy called the 30-year Triads ruled starting at the year 404 BC. Oligarchy was also in the Greek states of Megara and Thebes. Eventually, the poor people got tired of being ruled by the rich people and overthrew the oligarchy, creating a democracy. Modern-day examples of oligarchy. Russia. Vladimir Putin is a member of a Russian oligarchy that has controlled the country as far back as the 1400s. Putin acted as president in 1999 and 2000 after Boris Yeltsin resigned. Putin is now serving in his 4th term. First term was from 2000 to 2004. Second term was from 2004 to 2008. Third term was from 2012 to 2018. And fourth term was from 2018 to right now. South Africa. An oligarchy from 1948 to 1993 was run by Caucasian descendants of Dutch immigrants. The National Party were the leaders.
What's up? It's Cam, and
And today I'll be presenting to you tyrants. Tyrants have a different meaning as in Greece and around the world. So in Greece, a tyrant is a ruler who took power illegally. But today around the world, we know tyrants as cruel leaders or harsh leaders. And tyrants run their government very similar to how dictators run their government. So there isn't much information on tyrants because tyrants isn't a particular government. It is a phrase, but tyrants and dictators are pretty much the same thing. And there was a lot of information on dictatorship. So I'm just going to give you information on dictatorship. And please remember that dictatorship is the same thing as a tyrant, or tyrants ran their government the same way a dictator did. So a dictator is one person who is usually a man who has complete power over a country. So as we know, we have 3 parts of our government. And as a dictator, the one person would have complete power over all of that. So everything that needs to have leaders for, the dictator is the top in that. So, and dictators usually have an example that you're probably more familiar with would be a vice president. So he is a smaller person in power. So, such as if he doesn't have a younger son or brother to pass down the power, he will simply just pass it to his vice president. So power gets passed down by a dictator dying or resigning. Then as I said, his power gets passed down to the next man in his family, or that vice president that I was telling you about. And it is not called a vice president. It's just another man down in power. And if the man has a younger daughter and he does decide to give it to her, a daughter or a woman can be a dictator, but very rarely does this happen. So like I said, a dictator has complete power over everything. An example, money, war, how much money is getting pumped into the military, plan of attack, all of that is led by the dictator, and how the country is ran. He gets to decide everything, how everything runs, and once a dictator gives on power, it's a completely new country for him to set in stone any rules that he wants to. So, for example, if I was a dictator and I said, this is kind of crazy, but no red cars on the highway, and say another person steps in and becomes a dictator, and say I have a son, my son steps in, he said, you know what, red cars can be on the highway. That's completely fine. Rules do not set in stone as power gets passed on. And often a dictatorship type government, the dictator is often harsh because he gets what he wants. If he doesn't like something, simply as our political belief, if we want that, if we were a dictator and he believes in something, he doesn't have to listen to the whole country saying, no, don't do this. He can simply do it without without any people saying, no, you shouldn't do this, and passing laws as we do in America. That does not happen in a dictatorship. So an example of going back to definition-wise, in ancient Greece, a tyrant, a person who has gained power illegally. An example of this was a very rich man named Tyrannos. So this happened in the 10th century. Tyrannos bought slaves and made them act. Their job wasn't to work on a farm, it was to be huge supporters of him. And he made them do things, build roads, build homes, build parks, and he'd take all the credit for doing it. And
he had no relation to any rulers, but he acted like he was a nephew of a former ruler. And when he finally gained power, he said that he was going to be extremely nice to everyone. And Corinth, at the time, that's where he ruled, was going through a really rough time. And they had nobody to look to take power. And he stepped in with a lot of money and a lot of fake supporters. And Corinth thought, you know what, this is a new face to rule. Maybe we should give it to him. And he took in, and he was evil and very harsh, and it was a really rough time in Corinth at the time. So, 2 examples of dictatorship right now is Zimbabwe. Emerson Mnangagwa took over after Robert Mugabe's resigning. So Emerson Mnangagwa was vice president. Like I said, that's not really what they're called. They're just the next man down. But he was his kind of lower man kind of thing. Emerson Mnangagwa. Robert Mugabe was 87, so he was getting older, and he decided to pass down to his next guy. Emerson was not related to him, but he was that vice president. Mugabe has been the dictator there in Zimbabwe for since November 24th, 2018. And actually, Zimbabwe is one of those. There is over 100 dictatorships in the country, usually ran by smaller countries, because they're not have enough money to create and pay for as much rulers or leaders that they have as America does. So they only have one, maybe 3. One, or a small group, also is known as a dictatorship, maybe 3 or 4. The difference between a dictatorship and an oligarchy with few people is a dictatorship, like I said, is complete power with those 3 people. Usually there's one, but very few there is many people. But those 3 people have complete power. There has been a few examples where father and son have been the 2 dictators, and many times it ends in rebellious because they very often butt heads. So if a country does have a 3-man dictatorship, they must be very, very willing to have their voice respected, but also if they get turned down, they must be okay with that. Another example of this is North Korea. Kim Jong-un took over after his father in 2012. His father had a really rough time trying to kind of get along with the North Korean people, and he thought he was also getting old, so he decided to pass on his power to his son. This is my slideshow for tyrants, and I hope everybody has a great stays safe during this really rough time. Thank you.
Summarizing government. The monarchs were the earliest form of Greek government. A monarchy is a king or queen that rules the government. Most governments in Greece started as monarchies, then changed to aristocracy. An aristocracy is a government ruled by the upper class of society. What city-states had this government? The city-state of Corinth began as a monarchy, then later became an aristocracy. Many other city-states also follow the path of changing from monarchy to aristocracy around 700 BC. The leaders of Corinth were known as the Bacchid family of nobles, and they ruled from the 7th to 8th century. An example of a monarchy would be like the Mycenaeans, who ruled over Greece from 2000 to 1100 BC. Modern-day examples. An example of an aristocrat would be like President Trump, because you have to have a certain amount of money to run for president, and he ruled for about 4 years, and is still ruling today. An example of a monarchy would be like Queen Elizabeth II, because she is the queen of the whole United Kingdom, and she has been in power for about 66 years. And this is my works cited page, and that is my presentation.
Ellie, and I had tyrants for my government type. So I have a picture of a guy on a throne that I'm pretty sure is a tyrant. And then for my second slide, I said that tyrants are cruel leaders that took power illegally. Tyrants were kings without being born into a royal family. Tyrants played an important role in the development of making rules. Tyrants also helped overthrow oligarchies. Tyrants were the leaders of the dictatorship government, and the most known tyrant in Greece was Hippias. That's a picture of Hippias, and then I chose a crown just because they're leaders, kings, basically like that. And then for my third slide, I said that Athens has a dictatorship government type, which was ruled by Hippias, which he later got overthrown and started a democracy. That's a picture of Athens, I believe. And then the Persians also had a dictatorship government type, but they preferred to keep tyrants in charge of the Greek cities of Anatolia. And that's just a little map of Anatolia. And I believe I said before, tyrants weren't specifically a government, they're the kings and leaders of the dictatorship government. And then some other examples of tyrants are Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party. That's a picture. And then Kim Jong-il, I believe, is the second leader of North Korea. And then Joseph Stalin was the general secretary of the Communist Party. And I believe he also led a war. That's a picture of him. And then Henry VIII was the King of England from 1509 to 1547, but he died. And that was a picture of him. And for my final slide, I just have my citations. So, that was my whole presentation on tyrants.
Okay, so my slide is on monarchies and Astarchies, and by me. So summarizing my government, a monarchy was the earliest form of government in Greece, and aristocracy was also a form of government similar to the monarchies, but formed by a privileged class. A monarchy has a king or queen that has supreme power and rules, and Astarchies have a upper class or of associate. Their rulers are an upper class of associate or by nobilities. The rulers of monarchy is the king or queen, and the ruler of Astarchies were the upper class associates or nobles, like dukes and duchesses. Okay, the king and queen monarchies made the rules, and Astarchies is a small, privileged group that makes the rules. City-states that started with monarchies. This is the Corinths. The Corinths. They were the city that monarchies led in their city-state, and then the Bacchides family of nobles were the leaders, and then the family ruled for 2 centuries, 7 and 8. And then Athens is another city-state that was ruled by the Astarchies, or however you say that. And Perseus was the leader of Athens, and he ruled for 621 to 508 BCE. Modern day. So modern day stuff that were like the monarchies is Denmark was one, and they were ruled by Margaret II, and she ruled since 1972 to present. And Canada is another one, and it was ruled by Queen Elizabeth, and then ruled since February 6th, 1952 to present day now. And then that's it, and then I've just we're excited. Okay.
And I'm going to be doing my presentation on oligarchy. Hello, this is Ethan Woods, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on oligarchy. And the two pictures I have is one of a birthday party and one of an army, and I'll explain why both of those are there pretty soon. Okay, so the oligarchy chose leaders due to wealthiness and how much they owned. So the oligarchy favored the rich completely and almost, you could say, forgot about the poor. There was rarely only one leader at a time. There were normally a group of 3 or 4. The oligarchies used their powers toward hunting and throwing parties, which is why I had the pictures of hunting in a birthday party. The oligarchy also passed laws that made rich people richer and increased taxes for poor people. Again, they favored rich people. They used the army to force the people to obey their laws. The oligarchies were extremely strict, and they favored rich people, so they were very strict. Well, surprisingly, in about 800 BC, almost every place with a government was run by oligarchy because they were basically the only government that was around then. The oligarchy started to fall apart when people realized how favored the rich was and how poorly the poor was treated, and also like other governments started to grow, and they were like, okay, this government seems a lot better. Then by 650 BC, Sparta was the only place that still used the oligarchy system, and it went from the best government to possibly the worst government. Some modern-day examples are some South African cities, some Libya cities, and the whole country of Rhodesia. This is the only country in the whole world that completely uses the oligarchy system. And the reason there is not more is because of the strictness and the hate towards the poor. And this is the works cited. I used, obviously, our textbook and 4 other sources. So, thank you, and have a good day.
All right, Tyrants by Kaylee. Who are tyrants? Tyrants are people that illegally took power as a ruler. In other words, they battled until they became ruler. Tyrants did this because they were not born into a royal family. Tyrants helped poor people to get them to vote, like by building them free homes. They were known as cruel rulers. Government where they ruled. Tyrants ruled 2 types of government, a tyranny or a dictatorship. Tyrannies were in Greek and Asia. The last model of tyrants in the 6th century in Asia. Some names of tyrants from ancient Greece are Thrasybulus and Cleisthenes. Connections. An example of tyrants now is when a president does something illegal during an election and gets away with it. For example, like bribing people to vote for them. Citations. And our last one. Thank you, Lucy, for the dog toy in the background. Thank you. Thank you. Oligarchy by Whitney. Oligarchy in ancient Greece. There was a time that oligarchy was very common in ancient Greece. Oligarchy comes from a Greek word that means ruled by many. This makes sense because Greece was ruled by many powerful and rich people. Oligarchs were often cruel to citizens. If an oligarchy was ran correctly, which didn't happen often, the citizens would not have been treated cruelly. City-states with oligarchy. A large amount of city-states that use oligarchy were Athens city-states. 2 of these Athens city-states were Megara and Thebes. They both had a group of powerful leaders. Modern-day examples of oligarchy. One of the most well-known countries with oligarchy is Russia. A lot of South America has oligarchy too. The U.S. is also turning into an oligarchy. Zimbabwe is also an oligarchy. And work cited. All right. Later today, I'm going to be posting some questions for you to answer, which will be due tomorrow, which are going to relate to the government types, like I said at the very top. So have yourself a great day.